welcome everyone to the third webinar of our series of sustainability and lifecycle assessment webinars hosted by our startup TOSSA Sustainability Services. And feel free to keep introducing yourself if you haven't done it yet. And as you are doing this, we will as well start by introducing ourselves to you for those of you who don't know us. We are TOSSA Sustainability Services, a startup with a mission to empower companies to make the best sustainable and ESG decisions. We are a team of 4 members. Myself, I'm Marwa Hanouf. I am a founder, director, and CEO in TOSSA. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow at University of Calgary. I'm joined also here with Alejandro Padilla Rivera, who's a founder, director, and CTO in TOSSA, and also a postdoctoral fellow at University of Calgary. I'm also joined with Getachew Asefa, who's a founder, director, and advisor in TOSSA, and a professor at University of Calgary. And our 4th team member is Ian Gates, who is a founder, director, and advisor in TOSSA, also and a professor at University of Calgary. As a team, we do combine multiple years of experience and expertise working on lifecycle sustainability assessment, social lifecycle assessment, and energy technology systems, sustainable energy systems, and other related areas. As a startup, we are originated from University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada. We have been formed in Calgary in early 2022, and we do provide an intuitive computer-based sustainability and ESG plus software tool that evaluates the whole sustainability performance of any product, service, or corporate operations based on a standardized lifecycle assessment method. As a startup, we do not only offer software licenses, but we do offer also other services, including courses, training sessions, webinars, and consultancy services on different areas from our expertise, including lifecycle assessment, social lifecycle assessment, ESG assessment, lifecycle sustainability assessment, and other related areas. And recently, our startup has announced a series of free sustainability and lifecycle assessment webinars open for everyone, including academics, business leaders, decision makers, and policymakers. Our webinars cover a wide range of topics, from triple bottom line thinking to lifecycle assessment to lifecycle sustainability assessment and social lifecycle assessment. Today's webinar is the 3rd of this series of our sustainability and lifecycle assessment webinars. And all our webinars are recorded and will be available to you to watch later in a follow-up email by our TOSSA team. And you can feel free as well to visit our website and see our previous recorded webinars. All our webinars start by presentation from TOSSA team for around 40 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A section where we will be addressing all your questions. Before I start with the webinar topic today, I would like to encourage everyone, if you have any question during the presentation, please feel free to put it in the chat section and we'll make sure to address that in the Q&A section. But also you are encouraged to raise your hand during the Q&A section and we'll make sure to get you in, unmute yourself and ask your question in person. So you can do it in either way you feel more comfortable with. So let's start with our webinar 3 topic here, where we'll be talking about social aspects in decision-making and sustainability. We'll be starting with some introduction, talking about the importance of considering social aspects in sustainability and decision-making. We're going to do a quick overview of some available tools and the framework that exists to address social aspects. We're going to zoom in more into the social lifecycle assessment tool, doing some introduction about this method, talking about the evolution of this method and some of the challenges that we confront when we apply social lifecycle assessment. We're going to talk a bit about the role of everyone to include social aspects when it comes to the application also of social lifecycle assessment. And along the presentation, we will cover some examples and we will go through a specific case study illustrating the application of social lifecycle assessment using our TOSSA software tool. And we're going to end with some final remarks and open the Q&A section. So starting from the concept of sustainability here, where the main goal is to achieve and sustain human well-being while considering the needs of current and future generations. As we always say, sustainability based on this goal is not based on the environmental dimension by itself, but it is considering this triple bottom line thinking, this triple bottom line dimensions covering the economic, the environmental, and the social. So the 3 Ps covering people, planet, and profit. However, the social sustainability dimension is often overlooked aspect of sustainability. We often forget about this dimension, or we find it hard to measure, hard to consider because of many challenges associated with it. And this is what we're gonna be talking about it inside our presentation, as well covering some of the challenges when it comes to social aspects. But we have been seeing this is changing over the time. We have been seeing more awareness on considering social aspects from different actors. For example, when it comes to companies, they are considering more or getting more attention in terms of making sure that their social image is well improved and well considered. The impact on the stakeholder groups in terms of workers, the indigenous communities, the consumers, the society is becoming more important for them. They want to assess their impact on the stakeholder groups. They want to make sure that their impact is positive because they don't want to be linked to some specific social issues such as child labor, corruption. All of that are putting pressure on companies to improve their social image, to include social aspects as part of their performance assessment. And part of that pressure is that coming from the investors and the consumers. Both of these actors, they want to know if companies they are investing in or products and services that they are purchasing are produced sustainably. So this comes as a pressure also on companies to consider social aspects as part of their performance assessment, as part of their sustainability reporting also, to make sure that they are doing well in terms of the impact on the different stakeholder groups. With all of this, it's becoming more known that sustainability is not only about environmental, but it is going beyond that, covering the social aspects. We are seeing many products and many companies that are well positioned when it comes to environmental performance, when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for example, as the example that we are seeing in front of us, which is related to Tesla in terms of electric cars, that for sure, if we look deeper, they are doing well in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions compared to other gas cars, for example. But the question here is that a sustainable transport? What about the social aspects? Some social aspects related to these productions or companies are sometimes not doing well, are sometimes need improvements. The example that we are seeing in front of us is related, for example, to the aspects related to workers' rights, social aspects related to freedom of association. This would question how sustainable are these companies, how sustainable are the production processes. And this is why social aspects are becoming as well part of our international guidelines. Here we are seeing this connection with sustainable development goals. If we look at the 17 sustainable development goals, we can see and zoom into each SDG, we can see direct and indirect connection to socioeconomic impacts. Even if they are environmental SDGs, if we look deeper, we can see socioeconomic connections. And this is where social aspects are becoming more important to consider in our performance assessments. As well, social aspects are part of the ESG, which is the environmental, social, and governance assessment. This assessment that has been recognized as an important component of sustainable investment and corporate strategies. Companies and investors are increasingly using the environmental, social, and governance data and metrics to evaluate their social performance. They want to make it as part of their reporting, sustainability performance. They want to integrate that to help mitigate social risks and enhance the stakeholder engagement. For sure, when we want to integrate social as part of the ESG assessment, there are a lot of challenges in relation to what metrics I want to consider to assess those social aspects, what data I should use, what information I have to collect. So all of these are challenges that, as well, we're going to talk about it after a bit inside our webinar. But despite these challenges, it is important to consider social aspects as part of this ESG assessment in order to improve the sustainable investment and improve the sustainable corporate strategy for companies. So we are seeing with all this awareness on the social aspects that the success of any decision around us at any stage can be related to social aspects. Addressing social aspects can enhance the stakeholder engagement, can enhance the stakeholder collaboration, build the trust among the stakeholder groups. It can improve the social performance and reputation of companies. It can reduce social risks and help companies mitigate these social risks. It can increase the transparency and accountability of companies by having this sustainable reporting transparently done by companies. And it can as well help companies align their work with the global sustainable development goals, as we have been seeing with this connection between the sustainable development goals and social aspects. And with all of this, social aspects are right now becoming more part of the guidelines. And we are seeing as well some tools and frameworks considering social aspects. And this is what we're going to see with Alejandro right now.
Thank you, Marwa. Yes, as you can see in this slide, there are many numeral guidelines regarding the evaluation of social aspects. And some of them are particularly coming from, for example, the International Labor Guidelines or principles, also from the United Nations Global Compact. And one of the more recent are regarding the guidelines for social cycle assessment, and we will be discussing further in this webinar. And lastly, also the OECD guidelines. But we know that sustainability is growing concern for organizations across the world. And as Marwa said earlier, they seek the balance between economic and also environmental in their operations. For example, in this slide, we can see different guidelines or frameworks that are being used outside for evaluate or to incorporate the social aspects into their operations. However, these different frameworks comes with different challenges, including, for example, complexity, lack of specificity, a difficulty to obtain reliable data. In this context, in this slide, we are presenting a brief description, for example, of the 4 of the most important frameworks outside: the GR Sustainability Reporting Guidelines, the Social Assessment Accountability, the ISO 26000, and also the Social Life Cycle Assessment. Some of these frameworks, they are only an extraction. They are not all of the framework outside of in the market. These are only an extraction. There are more, but these are the considered as a team for assessing the social aspect in the companies. And these different frameworks assess or cover different aspects. As you can see in this slide, they cover different labor practices related to workers in their operations, also related to human rights, society, product responsibility. The Social Accountability International, for example, focuses on child labor, or compulsory labor, health and safety, freedom of association, among others. The ISO 26000 also includes different organizational governance, human rights, labor practices for workers, different aspects related to community engagement. The social cycle guidelines, for example, assess human health in workers, in community, in society, working conditions, human rights, community health and safety, also in community, and different socioeconomic aspects. These are only some of the examples that these frameworks are covering. It's not all of the social aspects, because there are more than 40 or more than 50 per each of these different frameworks. It's only an extraction and only some of the examples that these frameworks are using to assess the social aspects in the sustainability dimension, in the social dimension. However, most of these frameworks focus particularly in one single phase. And why it's important to focus not only in one single phase, but also in the complete life cycle. Because, for example, in these articles highlights the importance to include the life cycle perspective in social assessment, particularly in this case, in the global clothes industry. And one way to incorporate this life cycle perspective is through the social cycle assessment. By using, for example, social cycle assessment, companies can gain a better comprehensive understanding on their social impacts in the complete supply chain and take a step to improve working conditions and respect human rights through the complete supply chain. And what is a social cycle assessment? We think that a social cycle assessment, as I said earlier, it's a different because it covers the life cycle perspective that not all the methodologies or frameworks are doing. And social cycle assessment is a methodology that evaluates social and socioeconomic impacts of products or services through their life cycle. Social cycle assessment also considers the entire supply chain, including, among others, working conditions, right workers, impacts on community, society, consumers, and children. The goal of social cycle assessment is to identify potential social risks and opportunities associated with a product or service and help companies to improve their social performance and also, for example, respect human rights. And the social cycle assessment, it's based on life cycle thinking. It comes from the environmental life cycle assessment, so it follows from the extraction of raw materials to end of life. And the current social life cycle guidelines covers 6 different stakeholders, sorry, value chain actors, the consumers, society, children, workers, and also a community. This social cycle assessment consider all the complete supply chains of a product or of service, and it helps to identify potential trade-offs and unattended consequences of social actions. And this helps to avoid problems shifting from one stage to another. And also social cycle assessment encourage stakeholder engagement and considering local or regional social conditions, ensuring that the social impacts are not simply transferred from one to another. And finally, by taking this holistic and stakeholders perspective, social life cycle assessment can help companies to address social issues in a more effective and sustainable way. And the evolution of social cycle assessment we highlight in 4 different times. The emergence in the around 2000, and it started from the life cycle assessment. And then in the 2009, it started with the standardization through the social life cycle guidelines. And these guidelines, it's the framework that the practitioner follow to perform or conduct a social life cycle assessment. The first version was launched in 2009, but then in 2017 and the following years, it was launched the second version of guidelines. In 2016, it comes the integration and application of these social life cycle assessment guidelines. And from that time, a have been more and more work assessment of social and psychological assessment of different products and services. And finally, repetition in 2020, the update of these social and psychological assessment guidelines that it incorporates more social aspects, and also it incorporates different another stakeholder group in the that it was not considered in the first version of these social and psychological guidelines. And as you can see in this slide, the evolution of social and psychological assessment publication has grown in the last 20 years. The number of research papers on these topics started from 2003, and then in the last 5-6 years, we can see that there have many different papers that have been launched in the 5-6 years, and we can see that different companies are expanding the inclusion of incorporating social aspects in their sustainability assessment, and they are this is a reflect that how these different publications have been increasing in the 5 or 6 year. There is also a growing interest in combining this social and psychological assessment with other methodologies, or for example, trying to incorporate into the life cycle assessment, environmental, this is assessment of social aspects. So this is why why the evolution of social and psychological publication is increased in the 5 or 6 years. We have also some real case study. It's only 2, there are many. For example, here we have 2 big companies. One of them is Unilever. Unilever conducted a social and psychological assessment, particularly on the Lipton tea supply chain in Kenya in 2015. They identified several areas for improvement and informing efforts to address specific issues. For example, living wage, safe working conditions, and access to healthcare and education. We have also the example of CNA. It's a global fashion retailer, and CNA conducted a social and psychological assessment, particularly in the cotton supply chain in 2016. They identified different social hotspots, such as child labor, low wages, poor condition in the supply chains, and also they inform this effort to address different issues through the sustainable sourcing initiatives, such as Better Cotton Initiative. And I said earlier that the number of publications have increased in the last 5-6 years, and also the diversity of areas is very different. For example, in this slide, we can see different industries are or started using social and psychological assessment in their operations. We have the example of salmon that was conducted, and the salmon industry conducted a social S-LCA in 2009. Then orange juice, for example, they also conducted a study in the same year. We have the industry, for example, related to coffee. We have also industry related to energy, bioenergy, that they conducted a study in 2013. For example, orange juice, we have example or industry related to vegetable or fruits. Also different or diversity industries, for example, or packaging. In 2000, it was one of the first industry that started conducting social LCA, and also related to buildings. So as you can see in this slide, we have a diversity of different areas, different industry that right now they are considering part of their operations, particularly in the sustainability assessment, the inclusion of a social LCA.
And with all this awareness on the social aspects, as well as the different applications of social life cycle assessment that Alejandro just mentioned, right now we're going to stop for a minute here and hear your thoughts about your experience on social aspects and how do you consider, if so, the social aspects in your own work. You're going to see right now popping up at your side a poll with the 3 questions where we are asking you how often do you consider social aspects in your decision-making process? Is it always, sometimes, rarely, or you have never considered that? And if you do consider social aspects in your decision-making process, do you consider that from a life cycle perspective? As Alejandro just mentioned, sometimes we consider social aspects in only one stage in our own, for example, decision part inside our company, inside our research project, inside our group, let's say, but we don't consider supply chain outside the whole life cycle stages of our decision-making process. And this is what social life cycle assessment does. So do you consider that life cycle perspective or no? And in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to integrating social aspects in sustainability and decision-making? For sure, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to considering social aspects, but we want to hear your thoughts on that. Is it a lack of stakeholder engagement? Is it insufficient data and information? We know that when it comes to data and information, it is kind of a big challenge when it comes to social aspects. Is it limited of technical resources or even funding? Is it resistance to change? Sometimes we just don't want to change things in our own operations. It's hard to make these changes, especially when it comes to social changes or other challenges that you may think about. And if you think about other challenges that we don't have here in the list, please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat section. It would be nice to see if you thought about other challenges here. And as we are waiting for you here for a minute to respond to these questions, we would like really from these questions to hear your thoughts and ideas about your own consideration of social aspects. You may be for sure from different backgrounds today joining us, probably working inside a company, consultancy company, or doing your own business on different sectors, or probably you are working on a group project or also a research project inside the university. In whatever we are doing, sometimes for sure it is important to consider social aspects. This consideration can be different based on the context, but it is important to consider social aspect as part of our own work. And we will be sharing the results of these questions with you here in a minute. Okay, so I will keep going, and again, we will share the results with you for these questions. And as you are responding to the last question regarding the challenges, for sure you may have, in your opinion, your own challenge when it comes to considering social aspects, but also when it comes to the application in general of social life cycle assessment. Yes, we have many challenges. And these challenges may depend on the sector, may depend on the context and the sector applying this tool. So for example, if a government is applying this tool, probably challenges is related to the lack of policy and regulatory framework surrounding social life cycle assessment. We do lack this regulatory framework when it comes to the application of S-LCA. Probably it's related to the limited capacities and resources that are needed to conduct S-LCA, or even the difficulty in engaging stakeholder groups, which needs a lot of resources. When it comes to academia, for sure, still at this moment, until this moment, we still lack of a general consensus in terms of the application of S-LCA methodology and metrics. Still, we are improving the method more and more. And as we are knowing more about this method, we are trying to improve our application of this S-LCA method. There is still a difficulty in accessing and sharing data. It's not really easy when it comes to social data to get the needed data to do this social life cycle assessment. And when it comes to integrating this tool with other sustainability assessment tools, with the environmental, with the economic, there is still limited information or limited integration application when it comes to that. And when it comes to industry, for sure, there are also some challenges associated with that, which is, again, it's related to data, information, how I can get the data from for all my supply chain. It is challenging to do that. And there is still a limited awareness and understanding on the social life cycle assessment among the stakeholders. And for sure, there is some cost and time associated with the conducting of social life cycle assessment that as a company, probably if it is a small company, we do lack the funding needed, the cost needed, and probably I don't have the technical team needed to conduct the social life cycle assessment. But despite all these challenges that comes from the different sectors, the application of social life cycle assessment also, when it comes to the different sectors, everyone plays a role in order to integrate social aspects in decision-making. And this is what we're gonna talk about it right now. This role comes back to the different sectors that we just talked about. And in one of our previous work as a research team, we did zoom into specifically the role of policymakers when it comes to enforcing and encouraging the application or the integration of social aspects. We try to focus and zoom into the role of policymakers to provide and improve better working or better social, background conditions here. So the question that we asked here is, what social aspects should be prioritized by policymakers to enforce the inclusion of social aspects in the development process and implementation stages of environmentally better technologies? We saw at the beginning of our webinar one example of how environmentally friendly products can be not sustainable from the social side. And this is where social aspects play a major role to make sure that environmentally friendly technologies, environmentally friendly products are sustainable from the social side also. And this is what we were asking as a question here in this paper that we published, where we try to zoom in again into the role of policymakers in enforcing and encouraging the adequate social conditions, adequate social background conditions in this implementation of environmentally better technologies. So we applied social life cycle assessment in different contexts here, or at different scales. We did apply it at country level for Canada. We did apply it at Alberta level, which is the province level, and at sector level for oil and gas sector. And based on this application, we were able to identify the social hotspots at these different scales. And then we looked at the existence of policies in relation to the different social areas at these different scales. And then based on this analysis, we were able to identify the social areas that have negative performance and associated with an absence of policies, those social areas that have positive performance and associated with an absence of policies, and those associated with a negative performance and the presence of policies, or positive performance and the presence of policies. The goal here was to zoom into what social areas our current policymakers, they have to initiate policies on those. This is where they lack the existence of policies, or those social areas where they need to improve the existence of policies, or they should keep going monitoring the existence policies to make sure that we still have positive performance. So the point here is to make sure that we have policies to enforce the inclusion of these social aspects in our performance assessment. Everyone plays a role, as I just mentioned, in terms of technology developers, in terms of sustainability analysts, to do the assessment on the social aspects and to identify where are the social areas that need improvements. The policymakers, in terms of initiating policies that can enforce the inclusion of these social aspects at different scales, but also technology developers and implementing companies to make sure that they include those social aspects as part of their process, as part of their assessment, as part of their reporting. But for sure, in doing so, the main challenge, again, that we see is the data, is how to get the data and the information to conduct this social assessment. When we conduct social assessment, the data and the information, data sources is the most important thing. And here in this slide, you are seeing the two major databases that exist when it comes to social lifecycle assessment. Here we are talking about social hotspots database and product social impact lifecycle assessment database, which is the S-LCA database. These two major databases provide generic social information at sector level and at country level that we can use in our social assessments, in conducting our social assessment, to provide probably generic data and connect it to our primary data, or use only generic data. But even with this existence of these generic databases, the challenge is how to make the social lifecycle assessment really simple, easy to use for anyone. Someone who doesn't have the technical information or the background information on social lifecycle assessment. How can I make this social lifecycle assessment really easy and simple for anyone to use it, and that we can make it as part of our work, whatever our work is? This is what we try to address in our TOSSA software tool. Our TOSSA software tool that I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, where I presented our startup, which is a TOSSA sustainability ESG software tool that evaluates the whole sustainability performance of any product, service, or corporate operation based on a standardized lifecycle assessment method. Our TOSSA software tool is combining power and simplicity by providing this simple process for our users and guided process to make sure that they input their data in an easy and guided process and make the results automated in this software tool. Because we are talking only about social here in this webinar, I'm going to zoom in and talk exactly about how social assessment is conducted here in our TOSSA software tool, and give you an example of some graphic results that we can see from our software tool. So TOSSA is providing here a guidance for our users to conduct the social assessment by inputting their data, but also by providing a direct connection to these generic databases that I mentioned, and providing the results in an automated way, where a user can see the results from the most aggregated way and zooming in into the details as much as we need based on the context and based on the purpose of our users. The social assessment in our tool is conducted using two different assessment methods. So the first method is this combination of the primary data and generic data. When we say primary data is, as a user, I have my own data that I can input into the software tool, but also I can use the generic databases to help me in any data that I don't have. So the users is guided throughout the process to input their data using a simple checklist approach. When it comes to social assessment, data is not easy to get. We are talking about qualitative data. So this simple checklist approach can help in this process definitely and make it as easy as possible. And the second method is to make it as a generic assessment using only generic data from those generic databases. And to show you some illustration here about some examples of the results that we can get from TOSSA software tool, here we are illustrating for you an example which is evaluating the social performance of high-density polyethylene production in Alberta, Canada. And at this slide, you can see how we are able to see the social hotspots along the product life cycle. So the social areas responsible for the largest social negative performance. And here I should say that this performance was done following the method that has been developed previously by our research group. And here we have assigned a scoring level for each social area, and then everything was aggregated along the product performance. So this is the most aggregated way. Then we are able to zoom in into another level, which is the stakeholder level, to know exactly which stakeholder groups are responsible for the largest social and negative impact also. But another way to see it is to go as well another level as a zoom in and see as well the social areas responsible for the largest negative performance and each process separately. So we can go from the most aggregated and zoom in depending on what we really need to know as detailed information in order to help us to see what needs to be done as improvement to improve my social performance. So we try to give you here some illustrative example about how our TOSSA software tool works in terms of this example. Right now, as we are ending our webinar, I would like just to end it here with some final remarks where to summarize a bit about our information. We saw how social aspects are really an important part when it comes to integrating sustainability in decision-making. It is important to consider a holistic approach when it comes to that, and having social aspect as part of this. Social aspects include multiple social areas from human rights, labor practices, community impacts, and equity. And despite the existence of different approaches, S-LCA, social life cycle assessment, is still considered the best approach to assess social impacts because of this life cycle perspective that avoids problem shifting. And here, in considering social aspects, we are for sure engaging stakeholders and promoting transparency and accountability. And as I said, everyone plays a role in order to consider social aspects, from government to business to academia to civil society. All of that would help us to integrate sustainability in its 3 dimensions in our decision-making to help us create more just and equitable societies and promote well-being of people and planet now and in the future, which is our main goal when it comes to sustainability. And because we cannot end the webinar today before we talk about our International Women's Day today. So as today marks this our International Women's Day, on behalf of TOSSA team, I would like as well to say Happy International Women's Day to all the women joining us as well in our webinar today. And it would be nice to have this connection between social life cycle assessment and the International Women's Day. So gender equality is one of the main social aspects that are considered to achieve a sustainable future. And despite we don't have statistical data that connects social life cycle assessment with International Women's Day, but for sure in social life cycle assessment, main social aspects related to gender equality, to equal opportunities and discrimination, to women's empowerment are considered as part of the assessment. Just as an example here, S-LCA can be used to assess the gender inequalities in the supply chain, to assess the impact on women's access to education, on their participation in decision-making, access to the resources and opportunities. We should not forget that women are part of the community, society, consumers. So this is why they are for sure part of this assessment. And by doing this assessment, companies can take action to support promoting work-life balance and gender equality. And as we are ending the webinar, we would like again to stop a minute here and hear your thoughts on this question quickly, which is asking you, which social aspect do you think is most important to consider in integrating sustainability in decision-making? We just talked about gender equality on our International Women's Day, but what do you think is the most important based on your thoughts? Is it community engagement and participation, labor and human rights, diversity, equity and inclusion, health and safety, or other aspects that we don't have here in this list? And if you consider other aspects, again, it would be nice to share your thoughts in the chat section, and I will try to do it as quickly as possible for the sake of time here. So as we are moving here toward the end of the webinar, and we will be opening the Q&A section in just a few seconds here. It would be nice again to share your thoughts on this question in terms of what do you think is the most important aspect, social aspect to consider in integrating sustainability in decision-making. And for sure, you might have different opinions based on the context that you are working on, or even the background, the country, or anything else. And we'll be sharing the results with you here in 1 minute also, once we have a good number of responses. And I will be moving forward here. As we are ending the webinar, I would like as well to And let everyone know, if you are interested, our upcoming webinar will be talking about sustainability in regional and international agreements. This will be on June 7, 2023. If you are interested to join us again in our next webinar, please, you're gonna receive again a link for the registration in a follow-up email by TOSSA team. And we would be happy to have you. An upcoming course that our startup is organizing is an introduction to lifecycle sustainability assessment, which is an online course that we are planning for. This has been rescheduled for fall 2023. There is no specific dates for this course, but if you are interested in this course or in any of our webinars, I would like to encourage you to follow us on Twitter, or follow us on LinkedIn, or visit our website and see our previous recorded webinars. So as well, you can keep up to date on our news and on our updates here as our startup. And if you are interested in any of our services as a startup, please feel free to contact us through our website, through our email, and our team would be happy to chat with you further. And with that, I would like to open it for Q&A.